Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome. Members and officers of the Council, welcome to the meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee. We'll just go through some housekeeping first. Fire evacuation procedure. If the fire alarm is activated, we'll vacate the offices via the stairs. Do not use the lifts. One of them is out of service, as you've noticed. Assemble in Hawley Square on the green, and officers will assist and advise when we can return to chamber. Does anyone intend to film the meeting? No, perfect. So we can skip that bit. And has everyone popped their mobile phones turned to silent, please? And please make sure they're not used to make or receive calls in the chamber while the meeting is in progress. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed for members of the public in perturbing good quality now. And it will be broadcast on Council's YouTube channel. So please, no scratches will be noted. So just be aware. Are there any councillors who wish to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1? No? Perfect. And we'll just go through our apologies for absence. We have received apologies from Councillor Will Scobie, Councillor Donaldson, Councillor Towning, who is being kindly subbed for by Councillor Davis, and Councillor Green. Any other apologies that we're aware of? Perfect. And any declarations of interest? Great. So we're going to start on the next agenda item. So we have the corporate risk management.
Sorry, Chair. Declarations of interest. I haven't yet told TDC that I'm a KCC councillor.
Oh, I think we know.
Yeah. It's on my list to go on the TDC website and do that. I'll try and do that.
Do you want it noted as part of the minutes of this meeting?
No.
Okay.
You should have said, Rob.
You kept that quiet. Okay, thank you. So, corporate risk management quarterly update. And who's going to do it? Is that Amy? Thank you so much. Could you please introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening all, and tonight I would like to present the Corporate Risk Report. As I'm sure you all know, for our authority monitors and manages its corporate risk through the Corporate and Service Risk Registers. So this report, as always, represents the position at the end of March. So it is just a snapshot of where the risk was and also the mitigations where they sat at that point in time. So please bear in mind that some of these risks may well have moved on since then. Just as a brief update before I present the report, today marks the day that the risk management strategy is refreshed. I've been meeting with subgroup committee members of the Governance and Audit Committee during this time over the last year, so thank you so much to everybody that's come. There's been a lot of discussion and agreement around the proposed strategy refresh, the risk appetite statement, which is new to Thanet District Council, the new 5x5 risk matrix, and the scoring mechanisms. And this has now been embedded into the new risk management strategy. And of course, the strategy refresh and risk appetite statement has been considered by CMT ahead of this meeting. We've also completed some training with the G&A subcommittee on the risk appetite statement and the risk app, which is where the risk registers will be recorded going forwards. And the risk app has now been developed to a point we're ready to roll this out to a series of drop-in sessions over the next 6 weeks. However, moving on to the report, members will see on page 10 of the reports pack, there are 2 new risks added to the report on this cycle, which we will go through, and no movement scoring on the existing risks. If members would like to turn to page 22 on the reports pack, the first new risk is the pay award 2026 to 27. As a brief overview of this has come from the HR risk register. It does have a total risk score of 12. This is made up of an impact score of 3 in the reputation, strategic, wellbeing, service and delivery and finance categories, and a likelihood score of 4. As you will note, this has been caused by the sharp increase in the national living wage, which has impacted on union demands, pay structure and salary sacrifices schemes. My colleagues in HR have detailed their mitigations to include a review of the salary sacrifice schemes, employee council meetings and alternative pay solutions such as multi-year deals. Before I move on to the second new risk, has anybody got any questions on this risk? No? Fantastic. So the second new risk is still on page 22. This has come from the Regeneration Risk Register, and this is for the Tudor House. This has a total risk score of 12, and again is made up of an impact score of 3 for reputation, finance, compliance, and it has a likelihood of 4, so that makes the 12. You will note that this is due to deterioration of the buildings. This has an impact on its listed status. Further damage will keep increasing for the cost of repair, lack of required resources to complete essential maintenance, creating a legal and reputational risk. Members will also note there's been multiple mitigation measures noted, such as a high-level conditions survey of the building. Officers have engaged with Historic England to review whether the Tudor House should be added to the Heritage at Risk Register, and engagement with key heritage organisations to provide information for decision-making about the Tudor House. So that is the two new risks on the risk register. Are there any questions on this risk or any of the other risks on the corporate risk report?
Go ahead, Councillor Packman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to let you know that you've got the score risk of 12 on the councillors' reports, but on the public reports, it's come out as 16. So can you just clarify which one
Apologies.
it will be? Is it 12 or 16? Thank you.
Sorry, it's 16. It was my fault. It was a typo on my written report. I do apologise. It's a 16.
Are there any other comments or questions? No, I just have a quick question about the Heritage at Risk Register. Does that affect, if we do get added to that, does that change how we make our own risk? Does it improve things, for example, because it's already being dealt with centrally?
I mean, I think that's probably a question that would be for Regeneration to answer, but my understanding is that actually going on the Heritage at Risk Register would reduce the risk to us, because there would be certain avenues that would be opened up to us as a result of being on there. But certainly that's a question I can pose to somebody like Louise, who would be able to answer, or Chris would be able to help with that as well.
Thank you, Amy. Is that coming through? Can you hear me? Yep. I think it's Mike might be able to add something to this as well. Neither of us are experts in this area, but I think it's complex. And Amy's right; it does open up some opportunities potentially for funding from certain organisations, but it also closes some avenues that we might be looking to use an asset in a certain way. So it's nuanced. It's having that status means it's probably more likely to attract public funding from third sector organisations, but your hands are tied potentially from disposal or development opportunities as well. So yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag.
Did you have anything to add, Mike?
Couldn't say more than Chris.
Go ahead, Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Chair. It was just about, can I ask questions about the Annex 1 as well?
I'm just about to go on to that.
I'll
so if
come on to that afterwards then, thanks.
So, yes, thank you, Councillor Yates, thank you, Chair. So the members will have seen the annexed report included in this pack, and will note that there's been some new risks added since the last presentation in October. Again, it is never my intention to go through each risk individually. We don't have enough time, although I would love to. But I did feel it was best to highlight one of the new risks in the report and a couple of risks that have now been removed as they have been successfully mitigated. So first of all, we're going to look at page 25 under pilotage, and this has come from the Maritime Operations Risk Register. This has been highlighted as the Port and Harbour currently only has one pilot. It does pose a risk during illness, holidays or other absences if pilotage is required. This could impact the income if vessels are turned away due to no pilot being available. We can see as well from the report that there are various mitigations being put in place, including budgets for the allocation of an assistant harbour master post, and that would increase the capacity for the statutory pilotage and the function of the Port and Harbour. This would also improve the staffing resilience for the site, which operates on a 24/7 basis. With those mitigations in place, eventually I would imagine that risk would then move off of the annex to a satisfactory level. I'd like to, though, highlight some positive things on the annex report, which is a couple of risks that have been removed. And if members could look at page 28, one that's been on the annex report for some time is the algae on the slipways. Actually, from an insurance perspective, we have always had risks of slip, trips and falls and algae on the slipways, and unfortunately we can't stop algae as much as we'd like to, but what we have done and what the team has really successfully found is ways to mitigate this risk successfully. So we've got things like thermoplastic signage in place being renewed, amongst the other mitigation measures. I think we can all agree that, that this is great progress. progress on a risk that we have had for a long time. And also we've been able to successfully defend an insurance claim based upon the mitigations that we have for this particular risk. So it's great news. And the last one I'd like to highlight is actually on page 31, which is the council chamber system. So as we all know, it has now had its upgrade, as is evident at tonight's committee meeting, and the wonderful training beforehand is up and running, and so we feel that's fantastic news all round. So that's just a few of the highlights of the annex report. Obviously happy to take questions on the rest of the report as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions? Go ahead, Councillor.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Firstly, just like thank you for the report, because I think it's the Annex 1 in particular is a good overview of some of the topics which are discussed in the background. For like Arlington House being one, that's one where I get regular discussions with residents. Just I think 2 weeks ago there was a fire in some of the commercial units next to that. Residents really upset and concerned. So to see it written down in a report like this is really appreciated. There's also like the regeneration timescales, and that's something which I get like quite regular correspondence on. The latest correspondence is now the skate park has a plan and like timings. What are the timings for the like Margate seafront toilets? Because that I think was due in 2026, which is this year. But yeah, I think as the report says, there's going to be updates to the internal project delivery board, but I don't know if anyone can answer anything tonight about the Margate seafront toilets. But I appreciate it's a GNA meeting, but I can try. But yeah, no, other than that, I just thank you for the report. It's really good and detailed. Thanks.
I'm not sure we really want to talk about the toilets, to be honest. Are we okay with that? Unless you wish to. Go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor. I can't give you any definitive timescales, but it is on the programme for this year. We're talking about the subterranean toilets by the clock tower. They won't be done and open in time for the season or anything like that, but there will, I think that we'll see progress this year, later on in the year with the process or the planning, the design work being finished, and actually some construction, I think, before the end of the year.
Thanks so much. Any other comments? Go ahead, John. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. And we're working. Just to say, I really welcome Arlington being put onto that, backing up what Rob said and so on. It's quite interesting because by now we were expecting to see scaffolding going up and that with what we were told at ONS. So the more focus we can get onto that, then. With regard to the pilotage, I'm glad to see that's on there as well, because it's been a vulnerability for a long time. I see Mike's here. Have we made any progress with identifying anyone or recruiting them, or is this likely to be on the register for long?
So, no, the short answer is no. We haven't started recruitment yet, so that needs to happen, and that will provide that resilience that we need for the pilotage. Of course, it's somewhat of a binary risk. Once we've got that, then we've got some resilience, and it will certainly change the risk score.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Great. So we'll go ahead. The recommendation then is that the Governance and Audit Committee is being asked to approve the Corporate Risk Management Quarterly Report and note the progress update. Please may I have a proposer? Thank you. Proposed by Councillor Britcher, seconded Councillor Packman. And this is an exciting bit. For all councillors agree, you get to vote.
Start the vote in 3, 2, 1. There we go. So we've got 7 voted, or 7 able to vote. 1 person didn't vote. 6 voted in favour. So that is agreed.
I think Councillor Evans wasn't able to vote, so perhaps we need to correct that.
Okay, we'll come and have a look at that in a sec.
Happy for me to carry on, or did you want to record Councillor Evans' vote before we do?
Do you want to do it by hand? 4.
Thank you so much. Okay, we're moving on to agenda item 4. This is the quarterly internal audit update. And could Simon, would you be happy to introduce the report for us, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This is our regular quarterly internal audit update report, summarising the work undertaken on your behalf since the date of the last meeting, together with details of the performance of the East Kent Audit Partnership to the 31st of March. And what a pleasure it is to present a report with such glowing results as the one before you this evening. I can honestly say I don't think I've ever presented a quarterly internal audit update report at any of our sites with so many substantial assurance conclusions. If I could draw your attention to the table on page 41, you will see that we concluded 8 new audits during the period, of which we concluded substantial assurance in 6 of those areas, reasonable in 1 area, and the final area was a consultancy piece of work which wasn't applicable for assurance purposes. Had it been, it would have been at least reasonable. So looking at the audits that we undertook, payroll and employee allowances, substantial with no recommendations. Considering the amount of money that obviously goes through your payroll system, you can take a great deal of comfort from that assurance rating. Similarly, Partnership 1 business rates, a great deal of money obviously goes through the business rate system. There we concluded substantial assurance with only 2 medium priority recommendations. We also undertook a governance review of Partnership 1. Equality and diversity, substantial with no recommendations. Looking back at the last time that was audited 3 to 4 years ago, it was limited assurance. So a very impressive turnaround in that area by Ingrid and her team. Probably the one that stands out for the most praise is housing responsive repairs and maintenance. Substantial assurance with no recommendations. I don't think I ever really expected to see a report of housing repairs with substantial assurance and no regs, because I think it's fair to say that some areas it is easier to conclude substantial assurance than others. Once you've got contractors, tenants, and somewhat tricky legislation, there's a lot potentially to go wrong. So absolute credit to Bob Porter, Sally O'Sullivan and their team in the housing department for that very impressive result. Budgetary control, first time we've done that one since the implementation of Tech 1. Substantial assurance with 1 low priority recommendation. So again, you can draw a lot of comfort from that result. Creditors and CIS, very solid, reasonable assurance. A couple of areas for improvement. Reasonably confident that that will go up to substantial at the time of follow-up. Supply chain cybersecurity, you will have noted from your risk register that cybersecurity is the #1 risk facing this organisation. It's probably the #1 risk facing most organisations. I think that that will continue to be the case for a very long time. So here, a very impressive set of results, a few recommendations for improvement. As I say, we didn't put an assurance level on it, but had we done so, it would have been a solid reasonable. As you know, a very important part of internal audit work is follow-up. So 3 to 6 months after we do the original audit, we go back and undertake a follow-up to see what recommendations have been implemented and to re-review the assurance level. During the period under review, we undertook 3, and they're detailed on page 50 of the agenda pack. Your leisure, very pleased to report the assurance level moved from limited up to reasonable. I'll come to tenant health and safety in a moment first. Project management, that was reasonable both before and after follow-up, simply because we need to see more projects go through the life cycle of the project management framework before we could say that the controls are embedded enough to increase the assurance level to substantial, but very impressive progress in that area. Tenant health and safety, leaving almost the best for last, really. And again, full credit to Bob Porter and Sally O'Sullivan for the very impressive results in this area. You'll note on page 51 and turn of the page on to 52, we broke the assurance levels down last time into their constituent parts. And we show you the assurance level both before and after follow-up. Some very key areas were already substantial assurance, such as gas safety, asbestos, Legionella. There was a few at the time of the original audit where we concluded limited assurance, Building Safety Act, fire safety, performance management and electrical safety. Very, very pleased to report that they have all moved up to at least reasonable assurance. And they were all fairly solid reasonables as well. Again, tenant health and safety is an area where achieving those high levels of assurance is difficult. There's a lot of things in play that could potentially go wrong. Thanet now has that very well managed. In terms of the appendices to the report, they are the ones that you will be familiar with from previous quarterly internal audit update reports. I'll perhaps only cover Annex 1, although obviously happy to take questions on any of them. Annex 1 is progress against the 25-26 plan to the end of the year, 31st of March. So it shows what we completed and how long we spent on each audit. Very pleased to report that we completed 94% of the agreed number of days. We did have a staff vacancy for about 3.5 months. So to achieve 94%, we were very pleased with that outcome. Also, within Annex 1, you have details of the progress against plan for Partnership 1, and the other annexes are the balance scorecard, etc., that you'll be familiar with from previous meetings. That's it from me, Chair, but obviously happy to take any questions members may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to receive such a clean bill of health, particularly in multifactorial areas such as housing. So it's a very good report to receive. Councillor Packman.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for that brilliant report. I just really wanted to highlight, following on from Simon's report, how impressed I am around the housing. It's always a difficult area, housing, because everyone's got an opinion of how it should be run, the tenants, the stakeholders, us, for example. But when we came into being elected in 2023, the state of the housing was probably still the fallout of East Kent housing and the Almo. And I think Helen Whitehead and Bob Porter, Sally O'Sullivan, Ashley Jackson, and all the team in housing, I think, need to be on record to say thank you, because I think we're probably one of the leading areas for housing. And that's very, very impressive, having worked in the housing sector. It's a mess, and for us not to be in a mess is really commendable, and I'm really pleased that the report has highlighted this. So I don't know if we can pass on thanks or note thanks or whatever, but it really does need to be highlighted, I think. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm sure it's noted. And any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I think I'd echo a lot of all of what Councillor Packman says. It's a question on refuse collection on Appendix 4. So it looks like there was a previous limited assurance, but I think since January 2026, when it was reported to committee, we've had quite substantial changes in our refuse collection. So will there be a follow-up audit And will that follow-up audit take into account the new changes? And when do you think that audit will be? Because I think it's almost like we might need to approach it differently now that we have changed our system. And I think it'd be good if that audit was done, but with enough time that it can be done after the new changes have settled in, I think would be fair. Cheers.
Do you have a response?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, that follow-up is currently in progress, and we should be in a position to report that to the next meeting of this committee, which I think is the 30th of June. So we're bringing it forward, and yes, it will take into consideration changes in collection arrangements that came into effect on the 1st of April.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to back up what my colleagues have said about the situation with housing, particularly the social housing. And I think out of those that have been mentioned, Sally O'Sullivan is the one that should be held up, because we have long praised her dashboard reportage and the fact that you can actually follow through and see where the direction is and look at a glance. And it would be good to see that same principle applied across more reporting. But as I say, I just wanted to back that up, because we have praised before, but clearly whilst it's easy for us to say, yes, this makes sense and we can read it, to then have the audit comfort as well proves that it's communication again and it's working. So wonderful.
Thank you for that. And any other comments or questions? Brilliant. So the recommendation is that the report be received by members. Further, that any changes to the agreed 25-26 and 26-27 internal audit plans resulting from changes in perceived risk, which we detail at point 5 of Annex 1 of the attached report, be approved. So please may I have a proposer? Councillor Bridger and Councillor Davis is seconding. Do all councillors agree? And this will be a vote. We could do it the old-fashioned way, if you wish. All right, so we're going to go the old-fashioned way, and may I just ask, do all councillors agree? Perfect, thank you. So next we're going on to agenda item 5. This is Procurement Waivers 25-26, the year-end report. Chris, would you please introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. This report provides an overview of the Council's use of procurement waivers during the 25-26 financial year, a period marked by significant transition following the implementation of the Procurement Act 2023 on the 24th of February 2025. Across the UK public sector, the new legislative regime has shifted focus towards transparency by default, necessitating more rigorous reporting and a more and a move from assessing most economically advantaged tender, what was referred to as MEAT, to a broader most advantageous tender, MAT. For Thanet District Council, this has been a notable evolution in how contract procedure rules, CPRs, are applied and monitored to ensure public money achieves maximum value for money while maintaining operational agility. Some of the key figures I want to bring to your attention. The Council received 30 waiver applications in the last financial year, representing quite a significant increase of 11 applications compared to the 19 from the previous financial year. Of those 30 applications, 24 were approved. That's an increase of 5 on the previous year, and 6 of them were rejected. Notably, the previous year saw 0 rejections, highlighting a trend towards stricter internal challenge and closer alignment with the new statutory thresholds. Of the approved waivers, 20 were below the 140 threshold, while 4 were contracts valued at 140 and above. In terms of the trends in contextual drivers, I think it's fair to say the increase in waiver usage is largely down to increase in grant funding requirements. Many of the grants that we've got, they carry extremely short and strict timeframes for delivery and drawdown of the funds, often leaving us with insignificant time for a full competitive tender process. The primary reasons for the waivers to be approved, that remains consistent with previous years, including extreme urgency, circumstances where delays would lead to significant financial loss, personal injury or damaged property, where there's a single source supplier, and health and safety reasons. The 6 rejected waivers, this underscores the Council's commitment to robust governance. Rejections typically occur because the application was submitted retrospectively, which is not allowed under our contract procedure rules. The values or alternatively the values were above the Procurement Act thresholds, or it's determined that competitive process could have realistically been undertaken with the time frame allowed. What I intend to do is to the next meeting is to bring a detailed breakdown of those waivers where you'll be able to see which procurements they relate to. But for commercial reasons, I didn't want to have that in the public domain because that could sort of hamper sort of competitive processes in the future. So I plan to bring that to a private session at the next meeting, as Sam said, at the end of June. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No? I just have a quick question. Are we getting, do you think with LGR we're going to have more restricted timeframes, so therefore are we likely to have more of these because of that?
It's difficult to say with LGR because a lot of the activity related to LGR will be actually moving existing contracts across to the new authority rather than undertaking specific procurement. A lot of the procurement activity that probably will be undertaken, for example, the need to procure a strategic partner. So the same way we had KPMG when we're pulling the bid together, we need to have a strategic partner in place for the transition. That procurement's going to be managed by Kent County Council, so that won't be held by us. So I'm not sure LGR will be a driver for procurement. In fact, what I'd be really concerned about is if we enter into any procurements in a rush fashion just before the cut-off date, and our external auditors will certainly be all over that. There have been examples in some instances elsewhere in the country where authorities have entered into long contracts just before the vesting day, which ties the hands of the new authorities and doesn't necessarily represent value for money. So we need to look at that where we can. There may be some instances where we're looking to apply extensions, and there may be some waivers in that instance because we'd be looking to perhaps have a 1 or 2 year extension across the vesting day period rather than enter into long-term longer term contracts at that date. I think some of them, that may be masked and offset by the fact that lots of the procurement activity we've seen recently in relation to the grant funding, while the activity still needs to be delivered, lots of the procurement activities getting close to an end now. So we're close to appointing main contractors for a lot of the schemes. So those numbers should actually reduce. So yeah, we'll see. There's lots of differing factors that affect it. I wouldn't want to put my hat on it one way or another, which way it's going to go right now, though.
No, thank you. That's reassuring. I was just a bit worried that sometimes with expedience, there's a kind of urge, a sort of instinct just to get things done before a certain deadline, and that wouldn't necessarily be to to benefit. So, but thank you for answering that. So, any other questions or thoughts on that? Go ahead, Councillor Patman.
Yeah, sorry, just on LGR, that's a really good point, actually, Councillor. You say about only kind of extending 1 or 2 years. My concern is going to be absolute chaos in the first 5 years, and I won't get political, but it will be chaos in the next 5 years. Shouldn't we be providing longer-term reassurance for our residents and continuation of services? Because my concern is we hand over to the new unitary authority and it's going to take them 5 years to get established, just like it did in 1970, I wasn't born, 3, 4. It took them a good 10 years to even establish and get the services up to a continued thing. Residents don't care. They just care who collects their bins, who, fills their potholes and makes sure social care is delivered, right? So can we not just, I know most of those are KCC, but from a TDC perspective, have we thought about LGR and actually providing a bit more extension? Or can we not afford that?
Very much that's what we'll be looking at, but would want to make sure the terms are appropriate for the service you're looking at. So, for example, when we were looking at finalising the Your Leisure lease arrangements, we'd been going through a really long process with that, and way before we were thinking about local government reorganisation. And originally the terms were much longer, but once LGR was on the horizon, I didn't want us, the council, to be in a situation where we could be tying those assets down to a lease or contractual arrangements that could be decades long, because we'll now have leisure arrangements that are held by Thanet, but also Canterbury, and we know Canterbury and some other authorities in the area. And as they come to an end, you want to try and manage those centrally. So you've got to kind of look at what's going on elsewhere. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all for any service area. Similarly, waste collection, if we take the example of one of the options of Canterbury, Dover and Thanet, there's 3 different arrangements for service delivery there. We've got in-house, Dover are outsourced, and Canterbury have got a LATCO in Kanenko. So I would be really concerned if Dover were to go out and say, let's have a 20-year contract, it would never be that long, for waste collection. Let's have a 20-year contract for waste collection. That would tie the hands of the new authority to do something that they consider of a transformation nature across the new geography, because they may decide, actually, well, we want it all in-house, or we want to tender it all out on a much larger contract, or we want to go down a LATCO. So I think it's appropriate that you look at the service area, what's going on in that geography, which would be much easier when we know who we're working with, and set the new contract arrangements depending on what's going on there. But it's, going back to your original point, it's going to be chaos. It's going to be really challenging. I think there's, my expectation is that there will be a period of time for the organisations to settle down, unless it's very unlikely, almost impossible, that it will just be operating seamlessly as one new organisation from day one, because the reality is you'll probably have separate pockets across the organisation of Thanet teams, Canterbury teams, or whoever else we're involved in, and then you'll slowly harmonise those services on a service-by-service basis. I'm going down a rabbit hole here, sorry, I appreciate this is LGR, not procurement waivers. The threshold we need to meet is safe and legal. You've got to do that. There is some ambition to have safe, they're talking about safe and legal plus, where you do some sort of transformation before. A section 151, I'm a little bit more nervous about that than perhaps the chief execs who are a bit more ambitious to get the transformation done in advance. There's some logic to it in terms of if you're going to take things apart and put them back together, why don't you put them back together in a better way? But for me, and I'm sure for Ingrid as well, we want to make sure they're safe and legal first before we sort of set our, set aspirations a bit higher than that. Okay.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. That's really refreshing to hear, Chris, or encouraging to hear, because, I mean, you mentioned waste, for example, and waste collection. The dynamics of waste collection in the more rural areas is completely different to, for instance, in Canterbury city area. I think our waste trucks do more miles than most authorities, just because of the geography and the So I think, just to reiterate, personally, I think it's absolutely vital that nobody is trying to bind any part of the authority into long term, because of course we don't even know if it's going to be 3, 4 unitaries. We'll not comment on that. But until that's known, there's a lot of conjecture, and I think it would be rash of anybody or any authority to be entering into long-term binding arrangements like that, because it could really prejudice millions of people ultimately, so, or several million. So, anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Evans.
Since the Thanet Way, to fix the Thanet Way is more than the whole of the KCC budget for roads for a whole year, and East Kent is going to inherit that. So, is there any mechanism that we can put forward as councils that can mitigate this? Because in East Kent we're going to have a big problem with roads.
We're moving beyond waivers, but are you happy to answer that?
Very, so at the moment, obviously, it's very much still a KCC function. I'm not I'm not as familiar as you will be, Councillor, with the sort of details of KCC's budgets. But in terms of once we've got the statutory order in place, in terms of what's happening for the new geography, there's then a couple of different processes where we have, are they joint committees, is that what they're referred to? Where there'll be senior officers and political interface as well, that will take an overview of spending at certain levels, so that spending cannot be incurred without a certain level of oversight and approval. And then beyond that, once we had the shadow council elections in May 27, you've then got the whole shadow council coming into play, and the governance arrangements will have to work through that. We've got working groups. Ingrid's on one of them at the moment to try and understand the mechanics of how that's going to work. It's slightly different in Kent than it has done in other places. Some authorities have just been a single county unitary and there's an aggregation of districts. That's much cleaner. Some have been split 2 ways. We're arguably, along I would say Essex, one of the more complex areas, because you have a large county geography, a number of districts, and a unitary into the mix. So how that governance works, who's got the proportionate voting shares as well, I'll leave that to the legal experts to work that one out. But yeah, there will be those mechanisms in place, but they're not quite there yet.
Great. Any other questions about the waivers report? No? Fantastic. The recommendation is that our committee notes the report. Do we all agree to note the report? Agreed? Thank you. So next we're moving on to agenda item 6. This is the external audit plan, and Darren Wells has kindly joined us on this lovely April evening to go through it. So are you happy to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. So the audit plan represents the outcome of the risk assessment work that we have been undertaking over the last couple of months. It's set in the context of the backstop position. So we highlight the timeline for the backstop. We note that it's coming forward each year, so all the audits have to be finished quicker. For 25-26, the deadline is the 31st of January 2027, but because for 26-27 the deadline will be the end of November, we're going to use 25-26 as a dry run to show that it's possible to complete the audit and have the to give you assurance in that time frame. So that's what we're planning to do for all of our local government audits for 25-26. We set out in the report our consideration of materiality, and that drives our approach to testing your financial statements. And we also highlight for you those risks that we think will require more audit focus, and they tend to be areas of judgment or high estimation. So an example is the valuation of property, plant and equipment. The risks that are highlighted in here are very common, and you may well be familiar with them from prior years. The only new risk for yourselves is the group consolidation, and we highlight at the moment that we don't have enough information to be clear if you are going to produce group accounts and if what the determination of materiality would be for the group accounts. So we're waiting, we need a little bit more information to be able to complete that aspect. The second element that's captured in the audit plan is value for money. So we highlight what we think are potential risks for the value for money review. Those are very much a roll forward from the findings from last year. We haven't identified any new risks, but we've highlighted the two risks raised last year, which we will follow up and reassess. I'm happy to take any questions that members may have.
Perfect, thank you so much. Do we have any comments or questions? Okay. And I think Chris has a couple of comments.
Thank you. Firstly, not to alarm councillors when they see the calendar of meetings at the moment. So as Darren said, we're going to be working closely with Grant Thornton to try and make sure we hit next year's target, which is early in November. It's a little bit closer to what used to be business as usual, and we're hopeful of seeing the plan of work. Everything's going well so far. I think we can hit that. But what we're intending to do, and working with colleagues with Dem Service at the moment, there's going to be some sort of backstop, dare I say, meetings put into the diary just in case. So there'll be one in November. Failing at that, if we don't pull that off, we'll also have a reserve one in for the end of January, because that's the actual statutory deadline that we have to have in there. If that doesn't go ahead, we may be able to pull. If we're able to pull it off, we might not need both meetings. So please don't be too alarmed if you see more like 5 or 6 meetings rather than the usual 4 in next year. You're not going to get walloped with more audit. It's just we want to make sure we've got the meetings lined up to try and hit those deadlines if we can. The other thing I was going to say about the group accounts, no, we're working through it. I'm hopeful, conversations I've had with colleagues, that we won't need to do group accounts, but we'll see. The group accounts would be necessary because we've got a new local authority trading company with Partnership One that provide our customer services, revenues and benefits. So like a large company, if you have subsidiary companies, we've now got a subsidiary. So you'd have to produce group accounts, but fingers crossed, we won't need to, because it's an absolute dog's dinner and a pig's ear to produce. So I'm really hoping, and I bet Darren's hoping he doesn't have to audit them as well yet. So I'm hopeful we'll get there, but time will tell.
Thank you. And I just had just a little question. I mean, because of the deadline being tighter, are you absolutely happy that, you know, staffing and everything is what you need for that to meet those deadlines?
Yes, very much so. But it's also worth saying it's a joint effort. It needs both the council and us to work collectively to achieve those deadlines. And I'm confident from the discussions we've had that both sides have that objective in mind, forefront to the mind, to achieve.
Sorry, it sounds like we have an eagle eye on this from both sides, but go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, support that completely. Want to work hand in glove with Grant Thornton on this. Something else, Darren, just wanted to sort of draw out is that, no, you've spoken about this before, it's highly likely we'll get a disclaimed opinion again for 25-26 because of the opening balances were disclaimed from 24-25. What we are working at absolutely is when we get to, I really want it when we get to next year. That's a big ask for 26-27 for it not to be disclaimed, but really what we've got to hit is 27-28, because that's when those are the accounts the new unitary would be set on. Ideally, if we can do it any further, that might be pushing the envelope a little bit, because as Darren's team have got a lot of work to be able to build up the assurance they have that those numbers are that really are true and fair. But what we need beyond anything is to make sure when we're auditing those 27-28 accounts that Darren can give an opinion one way or another, because that will help the new Section 151 officer to be able to advise on the budget, provide their Section 25 report on the robustness of reserves, because otherwise they are, to be fair, a little bit sort of aiming in the dark. We've been able to say whether they think that their numbers are robust, because it's a whole new finance team that Section 151 officer will have. They've not got the assurance of having worked with their colleagues, with their directors, with the finance team for a long time to know that their processes are slick. They're inheriting something that's brand new, so the assurance from external audit is really, really vital in that.
Any other comments or thoughts on that? Perfect. So the recommendation is that the external audit plan is noted. Do all councillors agree to note the report? Perfect, thank you. So that concludes tonight's proceedings for governance and audit. Thank you so much. And the time is 7:50, so well done, everyone.